Hello and welcome to the No Distance Records podcast with me, Owen, and joined by Alan, as always. And the interview we've got for you today is genuinely, absolutely fantastic. I mean, more stories here than in a big book of stories. I can't think of a good enough kind of joke there, but there we are. But Alan, tell us who we've got.
Yeah, so we have Piers Hewitt, who is the drummer for Boxer Rebellion. So I met Piers probably not even maybe a year or so, but Piers has become my drum teacher. And obviously, chatting with Piers over the last sort of several months, it's clear the guy's history is incredibly interesting, and it is full of stories. It is full of kind of rags to riches and back again and back again, and yeah, it's an amazing story, and it's so much insight for people interested in like how bands get signed and like what's all involved in it.
Yeah, and how being signed isn't the golden ticket you think it is. He describes himself in the interview as we were the luckiest, unluckiest band. We start off talking about his background and then we go into all of that. It is such a good listen. So enjoy it. Here you go.
Why the drums?
Wow. My mum and dad. My mum and dad were music teachers, primary school music teachers. But they kind of like they ran a. My dad also ran a choir. They also had I had a church background, and they were always doing church music groups and stuff. And they used to rehearse with their church music group at our house. And I guess one of my earliest memories, I was probably about 4, and I apparently arranged like a drum kit with saucepans on the floor, so I could join in, which sounds awful, but by all accounts, like quite naturally at that age, I was in time. So they kind of twigged that at some stage when I was ready, they would start me on lessons, and that was 7 years old. In the end, I started lessons.
Wow, amazing. So you were there putting a backbeat to All Creatures Great and Small, were you in the Sunday
school? Or music of that ilk. Little bit of a garage beat to Kumbaya and stuff. I don't really know. Like I said, it must have sounded pretty bad. But one thing from me teaching people as well throughout the years is when someone has a sense of time. When you know someone has a sense of time, you've jumped through a bunch of hoops already. It's very hard to force something with somebody who doesn't have a sense of time. So,
do you think there's some people then that just can't be taught that? There's some people who they cannot get that timing right. Oh, they just cannot get that feel. Is it very difficult?
You can push it up a hill a bit, but like I've got a friend of mine. I've known him for 30 odd years, and he goes to gigs all the time. Huge music fan. I've been to many festivals with him, and he cannot sing a note in tune, and he can't clap along in time. He's like a child. But he loves music so much, and I don't know. It's so I take it for granted that I have a musical background, and I've always played an instrument, because you see things from a different light as well when it comes to taking in and appreciating music, and I don't really know any different. But I wonder what it's like for someone who literally can't clap in time. I don't really know.
Oh, Alan, you're having the drum lessons, Alan. So...
yeah, he's talking about me.
No comment.
So obviously, when you're getting like stuck into the drums and you're learning, who were like the drummers that you started to kind of fall in love with, or were going to try and mimic, or people that you appreciated?
Well, I had a weird growing up, getting into music, and I feel like I might have mentioned one or two of these things to you in the past, actually, Alan. But
Yeah.
my brother was quite a bit older than me. He wasn't into like the newest and coolest music. My parents were classical musicians. I had no record collection to kind of inherit. And I just kind of went with whatever was thrown at me. And I wasn't really trying to listen to the newest, coolest thing at all. And actually, because I was playing drum, all I knew was what I wanted to play drums wise. I was influenced by like, not influenced, but the things that I wanted to listen to and play along with were like rock pop hits rather than like classic bands at that time. But I'll tell you what I really did like, which was, I guess, went through a little bit of a phase in the 90s. I really loved acid jazz.
Right.
And I kind of blamed one or two people that I knew, my brother included at that time. I don't think it was the coolest thing, but in terms of actually playing along, I still would love to be in some like weird, amazing 15-piece funk band with a 5-piece brass section. So wouldn't necessarily define that as like an influence, but like acid jazz and stuff, like the early Jamiroquai things and stuff, I found really cool to play along with. Much cooler than like anything that I listened to that was rock. It had its elements of rock at the time. Because I never really thought about making music at that time either. It was purely just from a learning and playing along perspective. So I loved all of that. And then through various people, I don't remember really being thrown much by people at school. Everyone was just trying to be too cool for school at that time. But I had a group of friends, a group of people I knew, musician friends who were a good 7 or 8 years older than me, and they got me into one or two things, including Paul Weller. So one of the first drummers that I listened to and thought, oh, what's he doing there? How is he doing that? It was Steve White, who played with Paul Weller for all through the Style Council and certainly his first 4 or 5 albums. And as soon as Steve White left the band of Paul Weller's band, the records changed actually. So I kind of stopped listening to Weller. But those 2 or 3 albums he released in the 90s were quite a big influence on how I went about practicing, and it opened my eyes to elements of playing that my tutor at the time hadn't really, for whatever reason. So probably I'm going to go with Steve White really as like an early, I really listened out for the drummer rather than the drums. There's a difference.
Yeah.
You can listen out for a cool drum track, but you're actually, I really liked his style of drumming rather than just the part that was being played.
And what was his? How would you characterize his style then? Because I'm a big fan of that mid-90s Weller stuff, Stanley Road, Heavy Soul, those kind of albums. I think they're great. But from a drumming point of view, what is it you appeal to you?
Well, I really liked. I've always really liked what he, the finesse that he brought to those records, and for the most part, an awful lot of them, they were fairly simple in the actual part that was constructed. Like Weller they were really quite successful albums, so they're never going to be massively left field. But then every 2/3 of a song, you pull off a little fill or something, when you go, oh, I don't know what you've done there. But more importantly, he served the song, and I've never really bought into, how many BPM can you play your kick pedals, and how fast can you do this, and can you like, I've really more bought into how well can you serve the song, and yet someone come away going, the drums is the best bit there. And I think it was a huge influence on me when I started writing music with that attitude, because I wanted people to notice me, but I didn't want the song to be ruined, because that can happen quite easily on all instruments.
I was going to say, yeah, guitarists are probably the worst for that, aren't they? Cool. So you then went off to London Music School, didn't you, to get your diploma?
This is your life, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
and we've got that teacher here tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to a school in Hutton called St Martin's, which is a really good school. And I'm coming to where you just led me to, but I was always one of those students that I always had an awful lot of ability, but I never really fulfilled it. My school reports were exactly the same in year 13 as they were in year 7, which was, he really got so much ability. I wish he'd apply himself a little bit more. But I think I just needed something which I really wanted to apply myself to, and it was only really about I was started playing music with a lot of people around the age of 15, 16, and I was like, oh man, this is great. I kind of want to see if there's anything out there rather than just get on the uni conveyor belt, because St Martin's was a conveyor belt for university, absolutely. And so I looked around when I was just in like year 12, and I remember going to an open day at Drum Tech down in over in Acton, and they've got a number of different elements to that as well, different instruments. I wasn't quite ready for it, and also I think it was a 2-year course, which felt a bit long, as I felt like as a musician, it's very different to just going to get a degree and then walking into a job and wanting to be at uni forever. But I felt like as a musician, there's a time for studying it, and there was a time for getting on with it. So I did have a bit of time out because I didn't feel like I was ready, because it was a very new idea to me and I had to make a decision pretty quickly. But I remember saying to my tutor at school, got to like the September of year 13, and he said, "Oh, you haven't filled your UCAS form out, Piers. What's going on?" I said, I don't know if I'm going to be doing university." And a very small amount of us that went through to do A levels that were not interested in university at that school. And he said, "Well, what? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking about going to go to music college and study drums." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I kind of want to do something that I enjoy." And he said, "It's not about enjoying yourself, Piers. It's about getting a career." And that was almost like the last bit of confirmation I needed.
This sounds like something from a film. It sounds like when they say to the guy, "I'm going to go do this anyway." God damn it.
I know.
I think it's our age group at school. Like, it just wasn't a thing. I remember, like, in the careers library, someone saying, "What do you want to do?" Like, it was music. They were like, "No."
Yeah.
They had a book on how to make bells. That's it. That's all they had.
Bells.
And bells, the church bells.
Oh,
That's the only book, anything to do with anything kind of music. There was no, like, the one thing he showed a bit of interest in, no encouragement. And I think that was what it was like sort of 30 years ago, wasn't it? It was, yeah.
It blew his mind that I wasn't going to go to university. So I found London Music School, which was a year-long course, but it was like September through to September, so it was a full year. It was 5 days a week. It was in at 10, leave at 5. None of this like 3 lectures a week nonsense that some of my mates were swanning around with at university. It felt like a real positive use of my time. I'd never done drums. I'd never played drums on a daily basis before. I'd never met so many musicians. I'd never met so many musicians that had just pure enthusiasm for playing music. I had suddenly had like 8 to 10 drum tutors, whereas I'd only ever known one. And it had its, on reflection, it was, I wish, what London Music School has turned into now, which is now it's over in Waterloo, and it's called London College of Contemporary Media or something. It looks amazing. It looks way better than what we had. And in some respects, I wish it had been a bit better, because it definitely had its aspects that were slightly lacking. But it was a pretty new. I think it was a fairly new thing, really, in the 90s for that type of college to exist. And I felt like they were almost learning a little bit as they were going, even though they'd been doing it for a few years. But yeah, it didn't really service people who fell behind very well. But I didn't. I just grabbed it with both hands and just did. I just loved it. And then I met. Well, you might ask me this anyway, but I met. If I hadn't gone to that college, I would never have met anyone in the Boxer Rebellion. Because the 2 original members were Nathan, who's still in it now, and the old guitarist Todd, who was from Australia. Nathan's from Tennessee, and they were both over for separate reasons. And they kind of met up on like the 12 Bar Club website off Denmark Street, and they kind of started writing songs together and decided they wanted to get a drummer. And the only place they advertised was London Music School. They've just sent them an advert to put up on the wall, and I replied. So I was like the only guy that replied to this one ad.
Was it an ambition of yours though? Were you like, I want to find a band to get into, or had you not thought that far ahead, or what was when this came along?
I don't think so. I think I envisaged dressing up as a Beatle 5 nights a week and earning good money doing it, and I don't know if I really thought. I think I just went into college thinking, well, it will like provide me with something, and I just want to see what happens. Like I want to study drums, right? And I think I've got fairly lucky, really, in that not many people that I went to college with that year ended up getting many opportunities or getting lucky with it. And it still took a long while after I left. And it's certainly not been like a money spinning arena selling act since, but certainly I'm pretty sure that there are a few people, because also the bassist of the Boxer Rebellion, I met him at college as well, so I kind of got him into it. So pretty sure a few people we went to college with from back in the day have kept a social media eye on what we're doing, and been quite pleased, because I know it's quite hard to have any success in music, so just to be able to do it, I think, is a success for some people these days, and certainly I see it that way.
Well, you say that you went off doing arenas, but it's a very successful band. You guys had tours around the world. You played on the David Letterman show. You had songs in some fantastic TV shows and films. You were signed by Alan McGee. I mean, most people would like give several parts of their body to have even half of that kind of career. So what was it like how did it take off? What was the moment when you thought this is going to go somewhere? Was it when McGee signed you? How did that all come about?
Well, we got fairly lucky. Well, yeah, we got fairly lucky early on in our circumstance, right? I will start all of this by saying that we are the luckiest unlucky band that I've ever come across. And we could write a book about it.
Go on.
But for certainly early on, one of the positives or the advantages that we had was that we were based in London. We had, from day one, we had a commitment way beyond what I was used to. I was in a local band prior to then, and it was like a rehearse once a week job, and there were 6 of us in it, and someone would always be late, and then you'd always end up rehearsing for like an hour and a half, and you'd never get anywhere, and you just rehearse to play gigs, and you can't do that and get anywhere. So this is the first time I was really with a bunch of people where from pretty early on it was like, we're going to rehearse daytimes here, like 2 or 3 days a week. We rehearsed in a really dingy, pretty stinky old rehearsal space called Backstreet Studios on Holloway Road, and it's pretty well known. Loads of bigger bands went through it. You'd recognise the kind of smell of it, I reckon. If we could scratch and sniff Backstreet Studios, you'd have smelt it somewhere. But yeah, it was one of these places where, you know, they had 8 rooms. It was always busy in the evenings and weekends. But we were just like, we're going to do this, and we rehearsed. We rehearsed because I think we knew that early on we weren't good enough, but we knew we could be good enough. That we were an acoustic act pretty much at the beginning. The 2 guys wrote pretty much a whole album together before we joined. I pretty much like sat and backed on it for a little bit, and we straight away had because they'd been writing, we had enough songs to be constantly doing gigs, and also because they were based in London. My singer had come over to Florida through Florida State University. Sorry, Nathan, I won't call him my singer. That's really not cool. But he had a whole load of American students which were gagging to go to whatever gigs we were doing, however bad or whatever crappy venue it was in. We did quite a few venues outside of the circuit, pubs in Fulham. You know, we did the Half Moon in Putney, which I've found out much later that there's no industry goes to Putney. But what we did was we developed a fan base on the London circuit, right? And then after about a year and a half or so, and then we started writing songs together, and that changed our sound dramatically. As soon as we started writing good songs, we basically changed our name overnight and to the Boxer Rebellion. And then out of nowhere, we were able to go to Water Rats and Dublin Castle and wherever it was and get regularly booked, because the bookers knew who we were, and they knew we were good actually by that stage, and we were bringing like 50 plus people through the door. Right, which is like a big, you know, some bands outside London, they'd work their tits off to do that once every 6 months. We were doing it every like 3 weeks. So we were quite lucky that we were able to cut our teeth on the London circuit, and people would be like, they'd be bringing work colleagues, and we started having lots of people coming to gigs that were friends of friends, and because they were like, oh, we're actually pretty good. You know, rather than, oh, I've got to go and see my mate's band.
We recognise that look, don't we, Alan? From our
I was just saying, it all sounds like a polar opposite to our old band.
But we worked hard to be good, but we knew we needed to do that. So yeah, we had those 2 things going for us when we were rehearsing full, you know, like 2 or 3 days a week, and we were gigging whenever we could, and what that rehearsal did was it allowed us to throw music out. So not just keep writing music, go, oh, we've got another gig, we need some new music, and just forcing new music into sets. That weakens you as an actor. You've got to throw out so much music to be good. And that's part of the process. And if you don't have time for that, then it's really, really difficult. So I knew that stuff was happening suddenly within about 6 months of when we changed our name. And I was kind of going around, we were starting to meet people in the industry, and there was definitely a buzz. And people, I would be introduced to people, this is such and such from, from Be Unique, or this is such and such from this agency, and they'd be like, oh, okay, cool, and it's like, oh God, like people that don't go to our gigs know who we are.
Right.
So I think that period was when I thought, oh, we've got an opportunity here. And we worked hard to get that. And then, so Alan McGee he kind of popped up out of nowhere, really. We did a single deal with him fairly early. So that was like.
Did he come and see you live?
He is written about that he saw us at Glastonbury in 2003. He didn't, because we would have definitely met him. We did a pretty weird wonder gig at Glastonbury in 2003, where about six to 8 weeks prior, we got a phone call from a guy called Saul, who used to run Nude Records, I think, or he was head of A&R at Nude, and he also ran a website called playlouder.com, and they had a competition. This was a big deal. This was part of the story, really, but they had a competition on their website to win one of 2 slots on the new band's tent stage of Glasgow in 2003. And he called our manager up, and he knew who we were. He said, look, we've had loads of entries, and it's got to go to an online vote, but there really aren't that many good ones. Can I put the boxes in to the last 8, I think it was. So we didn't enter it. And we were like, well, yeah, of course. So there were I think there was 8 or maybe 6 acts that were put online. There was a track put online, people voted online, and the winner, or the 2 winners, got to have a slot that year. Keane was in it. So Keane, which was a bit of a weird one. But they were on the scene at that time, seeing them on all the kind of bog listings all around London. So I knew that something was going on with them. But they lost. They didn't win it. So I can't even remember who the other band was. But I remember Keane, later, within 6 months, Keane would have probably been like, that was weird, wasn't it? Not winning that competition.
But now we've got a #1 album. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they were okay with it. But we did, and we played it, and it was on a Friday afternoon, 2003. I already had tickets, so I sold my tickets to a couple of mates. That was fantastic. And we played for 45 minutes, and it was probably the only time that weekend that it rained. And so the tent was packed.
Fantastic.
We'd never played to anything like that before. I think we'd only ever played outside London twice. And they were bad. But suddenly we played to I don't know, I guess it could have been 3, 4, 5,000 people out of nowhere. And then right at the side of the stage, I remember meeting, and they're always one of the first people to lurk around and try and pick you up. And we met a guy called Steve Zapp, who is an agent, quite a prominent agent, actually. And that we started working with him immediately. I just came off and I was packing my cymbals up, and he introduced himself, and then suddenly we had an agent. And I think that gig, people say Alan McGee saw us for the first time at that gig, but that's not true, because he was definitely not there, because he would have been right where Steve Zapp was.
Yeah.
But I think we played for him at Notting Hill Arts Club that week.
Okay.
And I think that might have aided things and you knew about it. And so Glastonbury was a nice little buzz story for people, I think. And it also made us think we can definitely play on big stages. So yeah, that was June 2003. Within a month, we'd agreed to do a single deal with Pop Tones, and then they put us out on tour in the September, October 2003. And we did like a 3 or 4 week tour of the UK, which blows my mind, but we did, and we played.
How many dates do you reckon you played in those 3 or 4 weeks?
I think we played something crazy like 19 gigs.
19 in like 20, 25 days kind of thing.
Yeah, it was, and it was the first time we'd ever been on tour. It was super exciting. We like some of the gigs, like if we were to do almost all the gigs now, they would be horrible, right? They would be like playing in Whitehaven Civic Hall to like 18 people. Whatever it was. But so I remember a couple came up and apologised that there weren't more people there because there was a fairground down the road. I was like, what? Where are we playing that a fairground competes with a gig going public? Yeah, we did some pretty, like, barely anybody at those shows, but it could, like, oh, it's so exciting.
What advice would you give for bands that are about to do that or looking to do that? The first tour they're going to play the Whitehaven Civic Centre and no one's going to turn up really, or they're going to play the Dog and Duck Mining Club in some northern town. What advice would you give those bands?
I would say that Queen played to 6 people at Leicester de Montfort once. John Deacon arranged it, so it happens to everybody. And if you can learn to put on a great show for 5 people, it's much easier to play in front of 5,000. It doesn't feel like on paper that it should be, but it's really hard to get your mojo when you've got 5 people there. And it's happened like once or twice, I think. But I think actually our second gig on that tour, we played at Leicester Sumo. We were just excited to be out, right? No, the third gig it was. The second one we played in Coventry, and the first time I was offered a kit from Pop Tones, they gave me a Premiere kit to go out with, and the head had been used loads, and I put my kick pedal through the bass drum on the second gig. The third gig was at Leicester Sumo, and we had a band called. Do you remember the Glitterati?
Vaguely.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they were all Image, no tunes, as far as I remember. But they supported us, and this is really cool. Like there were 2 people when we played. There were 2 paying members of the audience. Then there was our press girl, and she brought down a guy a Kerrang reviewer. When there are that many people at a gig, and you're a support band, you hang around, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they didn't. So we had literally 4 people. My mate, somebody else, his mate, our press girl, and this guy, and he wrote the best review of the show. Right.
Amazing.
So I'll never forget that as an early thing. So what's my advice? Just play like there were 4,000 people there rather than 4, and you will still be. You'll do exactly that. You kind of do exactly the same job, and there might be just as many people that are influential at that in those 4 people as there might be in those 4,000 people. So just don't be downbeat about it. Only be downbeat about it if you've been regularly playing to 5,000 people and then you're playing to 5. Maybe that's time to call it a day.
Sorry, so you had the Alan McGee thing. and then it sort of went on from there. But you said it sounds like this is the luckiest part of being in the band. What you mentioned, you were the unluckiest bit of being in the band. Where did that come in?
Pretty quickly. um, so yeah, Alan. In fact, I think I was telling Alan this only the other day. So we did a single deal with Pop Tones. I think we did 2 or 3 singles actually. And then I knew there was other interest around. What I didn't really know until much later was that he kind of put the feelers out that we were already signed. So there wasn't, by the time Alan had offered us an actual album deal, there wasn't really anything else on the table, I don't think. But they had done a joint venture with Mercury, and they told us. I remember specifically they told us there would be 2 bands on it. They wanted us to be one of the bands. It was, super exciting, and we took. It was a 5-album deal for what it's worth, and then within a month, we had this advance, and we were suddenly getting paid, and not loads, but we were getting paid. It was loads compared to what we were doing before, and then we did like 6 weeks down in 5 or 6 weeks down at a residential studio in Farnham called Jacobs, which isn't there anymore, but it was an amazing place. And then we did 3 weeks mixing in Eden Studios in West London. And I remember Alan came down on the penultimate day of mixing and didn't like it. It's like, hey, we've been doing this for weeks. You could have come down, And I remember him saying, literally said, I thought I'd signed the new Verve, but I've signed the new Ocean Size. It was not. It was not that. Yeah, I was like, "What? Just get involved, Just get involved." And my experience of people who we've let in to be that involved since, as I've always wanted them to be involved, or try to make sure that they are, if you know what I mean. But it's a differing success. But anyway, we ended up having to then go away and write some new things, despite having spent weeks doing this album. Write some new things and record them where we recorded our demos that he really liked. So our first album ended up being a little bit of a hodgepodge. The original demos, music that we'd recorded down at Jacobs, which he wasn't a massive fan of, and then the new stuff which was recorded where we'd done our demos, but in a better way. So, but anyway, by the time the following January came around, there were like 8 bands on this joint venture, not 2. And they spent loads of money on the others who managed to get various opportunities that we didn't, but they flopped, and the whole joint venture kind of went south pretty quickly, and we were dropped in the week that our album came out.
You were dropped in the week your album came out? Yeah,
in fact, I remember like a week or 2 before, and it was, the writing looked pretty much on the wall, and we had a tour booked, our own tour, and I remember Alan saying, we should probably cancel the tour so you can save your tour support for something better. I was like, that's awful. So I think we played London, and we honoured a gig at Lincoln Uni for some reason, and I'll never forget this, but we met up in Old Street. It was a pretty depressing couple of weeks. We met up in Old Street. Our manager in the van that morning told us he'd forgotten about a VAT bill, and we needed to pay it, and we absolutely had no money at all. We went up to Lincoln, we did this gig. It was pretty average. There were lovely people that booked us, but it was pretty average. And on the way back, we actually, because of road closures, we ran out of fuel, and we were driving back down the A1, and because we just hadn't come across a garage for so long, and we ended up we were just coming up to London Gateway services, and it just kind of like conked out on us. And the momentum, you weren't expecting this, were you? But I'll never forget, the momentum took us up the ramp for London Gateway services, across the road which led over the A1 into the forecourt of the garage. And this is like 2 a.m, and we kind of celebrated, go, can't believe we made it to the forecourt. We put fuel in, but it wouldn't work because we'd driven it to its emptiness. And so we slept in the van. It was so depressing.
Talk about being stuck in a metaphor. You're literally driving in a car that runs out of gas, and then you can't get.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
wow.
So
we ended up with this. Many people have told me how good that first album is. It hardly got anywhere. They made 5,000 physical copies, pushed it out. We never went abroad.
Exits. Is that the album Exits? Is that your first one?
Yeah, that's the first one. Yeah.
I listened to that this afternoon. I was listening to obviously a few bits and pieces, and it's interesting because you said you had, like you've said a few times, you got kind of tagged with like the next verve or being similar to Verve, but I weren't hearing that.
No, neither were we.
You sound like Alan McGee, Alan.
No, but I was getting like there were bits of Radiohead. Like, you're not like Radiohead, but just perhaps the way some of the songs are delivered, a hint in the vocal now and again, and the structure of the songs, and just bits and pieces. That was obviously I felt that's what to me was coming. There was lots of other stuff as well.
Yeah,
that seemed, but I wasn't getting the Verve thing at all.
Yeah, I don't remember us really writing songs around that time that we wanted to sound like anyone other than like Interpol, who were just
actually, yeah. There's quite a chunk of that in there. Yeah.
That was the only band I can think of at that time that we were all influenced by. But yeah, no, I know the Verve thing's hilarious. I remember being at Jacobs when we were recording, and saying, "Shall we listen to Urban Hymns?" And we might have been under the influence at the time. Just it was a bit of an evening off, and we couldn't even get to the end of it. Like, all the songs are so long, aren't they? So I remember thinking, there's some great songs on here. If I can't listen to a full version of their most classic album, surely we're not influenced by the Verve. but yeah, we have a lot of Verve fans. I've met quite a few Verve fans down the years who have been put onto us, I guess, by the lazy journalism and really like it. So yeah, that was a real bummer, and we could have split up actually quite easily, but we put a lot into it, and also we knew that we were good, and we knew that we'd been hard done by, I think. So to cut a really long story short, we spent the next 3 years, because we'd already started writing, committing to continuing it. We still rehearsed in Old Street, the Fortress Studios. We still committed to 2 or 3 days when we could. We all had like part-time jobs. I lived at home really quite late on, until quite late on. I couldn't have done it any other way. The other girls relied on their partners at the time, and they took on part-time jobs, but we committed to it. And again, we committed to doing daytimes and making sure we just carried on writing. And the second album kind of came out of that, and just scrabbling together some recording time, because there was a studio literally just upstairs at Fortress. We lucked out on a new manager based in Japan, who was altogether quite terrible at the time, but the one thing he did do is he funded our recording sessions. So we were able to, when we needed to, make really good recordings and take our time over it. And it was like, right, 3 days this weekend, and we'll do 3 days next month, and then within 2 or 3 years, we had a really good album, but we didn't really have anything to do with it. We had a bit of interest from people in the UK, but once you've done the rounds in the UK, no one gives you the time of day. You know, we'd already done it. We'd been around the block once. We'd been signed. People told us we needed to change our name. That didn't really seem like a good option. I remember having a chat with this is 2007. I remember we had a radio plugger down talking about our new stuff, and he said he really liked it. He said, you know, you should kind of change your name, and said, who do you see yourself being? And I remember Adam saying, we'd love to get ourselves to where Elbow are. You know, they just got dropped actually on their third album, but they had a good solid fan base that they could rely on to still release records. And I remember him saying, Elbow are finished, man. They're finished. And
Brit Awards and Olympic theme tune later on, pretty much.
Yeah. So not everyone's right. So yeah, it was quite hard. It was quite hard having this really good product and really not really having anything to do with it. And out of nowhere, our current manager was introduced to us through a mutual friend who worked at Fender, who said, look, this guy Sumit's wanted to take on some new acts. I really love you guys and I want you to meet him. And we met him. And so we ended up moving on from our guy who's based in Japan. That was mad, but it did pay for Union. And we have always been grateful for that. And then as soon as we got Sumit on board, and this is where we've gone from being really unlucky to really lucky. And again, I think I've told you this. It's quite boring for you now. He said he took over our old manager's inbox, right? And he said, you realise you've had somebody from iTunes asking you if they can release Union? And we said, no, not at all. He's not mentioned that at all. We nearly put Union out free on our website because we were like, well, there's nothing. We need people to hear it.
Yeah.
You know. And that was summer 2008. So that was the first thing he did. And it was literally one guy who used to own a record store in Connecticut called Damon. Saved our career, actually, almost single-handedly, and he knows this. And he then left his record store, and he was head of alternative and iTunes at the States, constantly saying, what's going on with your second album? We'd love to put it out. And then I remember when I was told about it, I had no idea about iTunes at the time. I wasn't using it. I was like, well, it'd be cool, I suppose, if they want to put it out. And I almost saw it no differently to us just putting it out on our website. And so it was the first thing our manager sorted out. And he was like, let's get this mastered, get them everything they need, and we'll let them put it out and see what we can do from there, basically. And they gave us, with no press or no radio anywhere in the world, not even in the UK, they gave us single of the week all over the world, right? Just because of this one guy and his boss Jay, who we're still really good friends with. They gave us single of the week all over the world, and I think everybody could get it for free. I think that was what happened with single of the week then. And then within like a couple of days, we were in the top 5 iTunes charts, like main charts, for a good 2 or 3 days from nothing.
Amazing.
So we sold, I can tell you now, Pop Tones Mercury put out 5,000 physical copies of Exits. They've all gone somewhere, but that's all they did. And we sold 10,000 copies of that in a week with nothing. With just iTunes going, listen to this. And then suddenly we had a fan base everywhere. which we'd only ever had a fan base in the UK, which was dead for us. So that's why we've never really been like a big festival band over here, because I genuinely think people have always loved us but didn't really know what to do with us. So we've just kind of explored avenues abroad, and that's where we've sustained a career. And we would never have had a career if we'd have continued to like hustle the UK.
I mean, that's sums up the changing nature of the industry right there, right? Is that some guy in Connecticut can hear your music. I mean, yeah, obviously the fact he was working for iTunes is, it's the massive thing in this story, but it was so easy to get your music out around the world. Didn't need to be physical, didn't need to convince loads of record shops to have it, didn't need to convince loads of radio play. And I know obviously iTunes is dead now and it's all Spotify and streaming, but it just shows that the even in the time that you were in the band between, Alan McGee signing you and them, just a short period of time, the industry changed so much.
100%. On that first album, I remember the writing was kind of on the wall. This is because kind of dates where we were at. We were on tour in the March of that 2004, and we had a single out. I think it might have been our last single before the album came out. And the label decided not to release any physical copies. They were just going to release it digitally only. And we were like, no way. How can we be putting a single out with no CDs? This is mental. And that's when we knew we were going to get dropped then. So it wasn't a surprise when we did. And then obviously, second album, there aren't any CDs. And for that reason, we were not allowed to chart in the UK. So that our case actually changed the rules at the time, because you needed to have a physical copy to stand any chance of charting. And then I think we were the first band or unsigned band to be in the Billboard charts on digital sales only.
Wow. Whoa.
That's a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Because they didn't have that ruling. But then nobody had really done that kind of release before. So that happened that fact came out of nowhere. So that was kind of cool. But then from that moment on, we've always licensed our albums to labels rather than signing our rights away to anybody. So our first album was the only album we really had a record deal on, so to speak. And we've recently got our rights back to that because it was so long ago, because we're really old.
So when you say you license them to labels, what does that entail exactly?
They just mean like we retained the rights to our stuff. They kind of, I guess, you kind of get less support, but then we already kind of had a fan base to work with, so you can sign your life away to a label and they'll probably work a lot harder for you, but there's also that obvious risk of it not working out and then you being absolutely in the hole to them, and then you're screwed.
Yeah.
So we didn't really want. We had a really dynamic manager. We still do, same guy, and he really opened up many doors.
Does that allow you to keep like full creativity on everything as well? So you've not got the interference of people going, "You ain't got a hit," or
"This doesn't sound like the verb."
Yeah,
Doesn't sound like the verb.
we did have interest at the time. In fact, within about 6 weeks, we had to go over to America really quickly. So my manager had loads of contacts in the industry over there, which our previous managers did not. He's like, we have to get over there really, really quick. So we booked a gig at Mercury Lounge in New York and the Troubadour in LA, and they sold out in super quick time, which was amazing. But we still had to buy our flights with Nathan's wife's redundancy pay because we didn't have any money.
Wow.
Wow.
That so we're like literally playing a sold out show in LA at the Troubadour, but that's how we paid for our airfare. And so it's kind of mental because we had this, we didn't have any. I don't even think we'd had the money in from the albums we'd sold in January at that time, right? And we had to get over there and like make the hay, even though we had no hay. So I remember going. This is another really solid, really interesting part of the whole story. We went to New York. We sold out the Mercury Lounge, and we went out to dinner. We quickly established an agent. wasn't hard. He's a great agent called Frank Riley. Got High Road touring over there. And we went out for dinner before our Mercury Lounge gig, and I remember being outside the restaurant with him, and he was gushing about Union, and I hadn't met him before. He was such a lovely guy. And I said to him, "Oh man, I'm glad you like it." I said, "Do you like the first one?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Our first album. Do you like the first album?" He was like, "This is your first album, right?" I said, "No, this is our second album." So like, we were totally new to so many people. So that's also why we got opportunities. And that's why we didn't get any more. We didn't really get much in the UK because and the UK is a pretty small industry as well. So we just didn't really get that. And so it was amazing to speak to like a real top quality agent over there who was like in deep enough that he was booking shows for us and taking us out for dinner and had no idea we even had another album. So we were in a pretty unique spot, to be honest. And that worked massively to our favor at the time, and that's where we got an awful lot of licensing to TV and film and stuff over that period from that time on, really. And again that sustained us as a band, as a business, more than record sales ever did.
Yeah, I don't want to be crass about it, but I guess is that where a lot of the money is these days in the industry? That if you can get a song on Grey's Anatomy or some of the other shows you got it on, that's going to give you more money perhaps than sales or streams or anything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people say, "Oh, you can go and make your money from live stuff." Well, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Unless you're selling out the arenas that everybody seems to keep posting pictures of on social media. But the lifeblood of the whole industry is full of industries full of venues that are hard to make money from once you actually add it all up. Streaming's sent income down the toilet, and yeah, now that whole market of sync for music is really really crowded because that is where the money's at, really. I remember when we were first coming out, if you kind of got an advert or something, it was a bit frowned upon. It wasn't very cool. And now, for a long time now, you pat other bands on the back for it. Oh, well done! You picked up a.
Yeah, do you guys chase that? Because obviously there's the whole sync licensing things like gone mental, so it's quite hard to people to pitch stuff. Or do you get people come to you saying, "We want that tune, can we use it?"
Both.
Yeah, so are you like actively out there trying to?
Yeah, we've always had everyone's got a sync agent in the same way that you've got. To be honest, sync agents and playlist people are the new radio guys. Playlists are more important than that can break you more than radio these days, and getting on a solid slot on TV can break you much more than radio as well. So yeah, we've always had that. How much that balance is of I guess at first what at first we had a lot of stuff where we were pitched and it's like, oh yeah, they're pretty cool. Or you get a lot of like, people saying, oh, we need someone that sounds like Muse, but not as expensive as Muse. You know, like stuff like that. So like, well, we're here.
Which is
and then,
funny because Muse are the less expensive version of Radiohead, so I guess that's kind of
and then after a while, people were like, oh, it'd be good to have the Boxer Rebellion on something like this, I would imagine, right? And then it's hard to know what the balance is of people who come to your table or whether you have to go to theirs, but it's still probably well in favour of having to go to theirs. But yeah, now the market's really crowded because at least 10 or so years ago, you were still making money out of people downloading your album. Don't even get that anymore.
If you're enjoying this No Distance Records podcast, then why not check out our No Distance Records Release Radar playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. It features under-the-radar acts who have no more than 20,000 listeners or 100,000 plays of a song in their catalog. And if you're not enjoying this podcast, check out our playlist anyway.
I mean, on the streaming thing, we talk about this a lot with our guests. Streaming, is it good or bad? And it seems to be you can hold both views, right? One is that it allows anyone in the world to listen to your music, and you can get your music out there without a record label. But on the other hand, it's killed sales in a lot of ways. What's your take on it broadly? Is it broadly good, broadly bad, or broadly both?
I mean, like I said, we had overnight a fan base globally, and that was mind blowing. It's always been a weird thing to know that we've got loads of fans in pretty much every country that consumes music, and without the digital age, that's impossible. But then you can't service them all. That's the trouble. You can't. I'd love to have been able to go to South America and play in Brazil and Argentina and all these wonderful countries that we seem to have a whole bunch of people asking us to play there. It's unaffordable. It's unaffordable. It's hard enough to tour to America the amount of times that we have, and Australia, cool. It costs so much money to get out to these places that are real. They've got a prominent music fan base, but we've been to Australia once. But the only reason we got there was really because we hopped there off the back of getting booked for a festival. Right, a couple of festivals which pay much bigger fees, and you can't go to Australia and do a tour on your own without that kind of backing. There aren't enough places anyway. So yeah, it's been great to develop a fan base all over the world. But the sad reality is, I'd love for them all to have an opportunity to see us play, but it's impossible. It's really. And it's become more and more hard as well over that period of time. Touring, quite a few bands, fairly significant bands over the last couple of years have just cancelled whole European tours, American bands, because they'll tell you it's for this reason, that reason, but I know for a fact it's not because of ticket sales, it's because the numbers don't add up. And it's just a very expensive venture to take to go over a big pond to get to play gigs. So that's always been the hardest part, not being able to play to all the people that appreciate your music. Hope that answers your question.
It does. I think we've eaten into a lot of your time, Piers. Is there anything more you wanted to ask Adam?
You've eaten into. I feel like I've eaten into.
No, not at all. I mean, I could listen to you talk for another 4 hours because I find this stuff as someone who's never had any success in my music, and I'm not trying to be self-pitying, but just that's where it's been. I find it fascinating to hear people who've managed to make a career out of it and had a success, and just and it sounds like you guys have had this sort of up and down kind of way, and it's such a great story that you found this audience found you, or you found this audience. You know, I think it's just it gives
Yeah,
hope. I think.
I honestly can't think of many UK bands, at least, that have played as many venues of the type of size that we have for this long. It's it's like we haven't done it full time for a little while, but it's obviously it still generates it's a part-time existence for us. And if we wanted to plunge back into doing it full time, it would become stressful again, because it is. It's like running a business, and that sucks. That side of it always sucks. I'll tell you what I didn't think about when I went to college was how much time being in a band. When you're in a band, how much time you're not playing music, which actually becomes quite a lot. If you become a session player, you probably play loads. If you're actually in a band, there's an awful lot of time that you don't end up playing music. You're basically sitting around a lot, and there's a lot of stuff that we have to, as people, because we haven't been committed to fully trusting a label and then doing all the boring bits. We've been involved a lot, lots of accountants meetings and product meetings and stuff like that, and making sure that we're in control of everything, and which is great, but it's not playing, so that side of it, it's always been, we kind of got used to it, and particularly when you're doing it full time. And things need to happen. We've had to make a lot of stuff happen ourselves. It's just there are pros and cons to that. Trying to remember what you asked me now.
I was just about to say, you have got a new EP out there as well, haven't you, with the Boxer Rebellion?
Yeah. So we're 3 tracks into 4. Some people were quite disappointed it's not an album. But
that's what I was going to ask. Like, what was the choice of EP and album? Do you think it makes a lot of difference whether you do an EP or an album?
I would prefer it to be an album, but we like in that moment, we our history over the last 2 years is that initially we decided we had quite a hiatus of about 4 years. Which COVID was a big part of that. We'd already had a bit of time off anyway. And then we realised that none of our albums were actually available on vinyl anymore, because all the ones that we'd actually made available had all sold out. Our first 3 records were only available through a box set. We only did 500 of them, and we were seeing people flog them for hundreds of dollars on websites. And we're like, nah, we should do that. So not for hundreds of dollars, but I'd rather take them out of the market and us be able to have a product for people. So we looked into remastering the first 4 albums, because actually the last 2 were connected with Cobalt, which is a bit of a different deal we had going there, but that's quite boring. So we were like, well, we've got to remaster these. And then our manager, after a little while, was like, you should probably do some gigs with this. And I'm like, yeah, we should probably do some gigs. So we didn't really know if anybody would really want to come and see us anymore. It's been quite a while. So we booked some gigs for March of last year, which partly because of how long the lead up for vinyl production was, which also blew our minds, but we also had a bit of a personal situation within the band. We put those dates back to the October of last year, and then our manager was like, you should probably do some new music, and he was right. Otherwise you're just you're like a bit of a legacy act, aren't you? We don't want to be that, and we don't want to be a band that go away and and just want to play our old material. But the logistics of actually us writing a whole album now they're not what they were. So we're nowhere near each other. Writing things remotely is quite hard. Getting us together is kind of harder. So we're kind of committing to a few days here and there. And so that's how an EP came about last year, really. If we'd have tried to craft an entire album, we wouldn't have been able to tour with any new material because it would have just taken too long. So we're kind of in the throes of starting new stuff together. But yeah, it's just life. It's just logistics, and two of us have got kids. They changed the climate. They changed the climate a little bit for everybody. So yeah, logistics is a massive thing now. It's really rubbish getting old.
I guess when you're not doing that, you're drum teaching, aren't you? So you're still doing it every day, aren't you?
Yeah, I've always taught. I've always taught a bit on the side, on the side. I've been teaching a little bit since I was about 15. So even when we were kind of full time, still had a bit of time at home, and always had a number of students, and they always were quite happy with me being away for a few weeks here and there, and then taking it up again. I've never had a tutor that hasn't been committed to gigs or touring. It's quite a normal thing. I've always actually quite liked. In the past, when I've had tutors, I've always enjoyed the fact that they're active musicians rather than somebody who's good at an instrument and just wants to teach it.
Yeah,
I think it's important that if you're gonna teach people how to play something, there are so many more elements to it. From my experience of recording and putting out records and the process of songwriting with people and creating parts, I think that should be part of learning an instrument, rather than just let's see how well you can play it. So sometimes I feel like my experience from being in the band is some lessons I've had with people who've talked a lot, and people that actually are interested in being in a band. They want to know how that side of it works, and I learned stuff like that from my tutors. So yeah, I really like teaching, and particularly like teaching people who appreciate that side of stuff a lot. That's I enjoy the rounded element of teaching, where I feel like I can offer a lot more than just teaching them how to play this bit and then that bit.
And how's Alan getting on with his lessons? I want a progress check on Alan. Imagine I'm his parent and it's parents' evening, and I've come in to ask how my little Alan's getting on with his lessons.
Yeah, he needs to drink less.
I've been saying that for years.
I'm going to pour another drink as you say that.
It would be very unfair. He's like, to be honest, the people that I enjoy teaching are people that appreciate the need for going away and practicing, because practice is where you make your progress. And also appreciate when that doesn't happen if they don't do it, or why that doesn't happen when they don't do it. And you practice, actually, don't you? Yeah.
Not as much as I do, as I should, rather. Don't practice as much as I should, but I just find it fun. It's a mental instrument to learn. It's nuts. But I think, like what you were saying, it's not just like you're my teacher going, do this, that, and the other. Like, we've chatted about all different kinds of stuff. So like half your brain's like, the drums inside out on every kind of pattern and paradiddle and whatever else is going on. But then the other half, you've had all that experience of like doing it and making it and what it takes, and like that's such a big thing to understand where you can start and where you can go to, which is great.
And also,
it's fun. And you let me drink at the lessons.
With all of this, with all the kind of storytelling, I always feel like we've achieved an awful lot, particularly considering for the most part of that time we've been independent. But we've always been a band that haven't like smashed it. So
Yeah.
I've always had friends in much more successful acts. And there's never like resentment there. But there's like there's always, but there is that kind of, I wish I knew what that felt like. So we've never been an act that has done everything that they have set out to do. If like I don't really know how some acts, where they go from where they currently are. What's Harry Styles' ambition these days? I've got no idea, other than to, I guess, to just keep writing great, in his opinion, great music that he really loves, and be proud of that. But actually, to try and build something, there's nothing more to build. But we've always had, I think we've always had many more stages to go from where we are that we haven't achieved. So I've kind of that element has always frustrated me, and also driven us, I think, to a point. So yeah, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe you've done that," and I'm like, "Yeah, but we've never done that."
I know, but I don't think you realise the difference from like local musician to what you've done. Like, I'm never going to go to LA and make a record, probably, or go on an American tour, or be on Letterman, or have a tune in like a massive TV program. You might fluke something, but that's a different world to 90% of the musicians out there, and we don't know how it all happens because we don't get to do it or get close to it.
Yeah, I know.
That's why this interview's been really like great for people to actually understand how that works.
Yeah, I think so. I think anyone listening to this, will have a great insight into the hard work that goes into, and the kind of, I think a great story about, the week your album comes out, you get jobs. It's how you think, 1 minute you think you've got it, the next thing you're delivering pizza again. It's that kind of thing, right? And it's just,
yeah, and there's also, I'll never forget the kind of thought process of, you put a lot of faith in people that are in the industry, have been doing it for a long time, because you haven't. And there were two moments where I thought, almost like, oh, we don't really have to do much now. It's kind of done. So I remember the first time we were quite early on, when we were trawling around. I was telling you about like developing that London fan base, but it's still like every gig we did, we still had to like send emails out to people and flick texts out and stuff, and it was and it was a ball ache, and I felt like I was bothering people, but people still came to the gigs. And then under our previous name, we did put out a single by hook or by crook, and we employed a PR company, and I still to this day don't really know how this happened, but we got Mark and Lard played it on Radio 1 in the middle of the day, and I lived at home. I was like 22, I think, 21, 22. I was living at home, and I was genuinely in my room, tidying my room up, because my dad had told me it was a dump, right? I'd been kind of told they might play it, and they did. And I remember thinking, I think I called my bassist Adam, and it was that was probably the most exhilarating moment in our entire career. We've done a lot since then, but that was so like something I'd never experienced at all. And I remember saying to him, "We're not going to have to invite anyone to gigs anymore.
This is a rock star now." Yeah.
One play on Mark and Lard, and I was thinking, this is it. Like, we can just kick back now. I tell you, it didn't happen. And the other thing was signing to a major label, and I remember the day we signed to Universal offices in Hammersmith, and we signed it, and then we went to the pub with Alan and his assistant Stephen, and Alan said, like, signing a record deal is like scoring a goal in the cup final. He said that to me, and I was like, God, you're right. You know, and again, I just thought our only job now is to just keep making good music. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. So many people involved. Like you get pushed from that like that product manager to that product manager. No one like. I would tell you what I would say to people if you want to. The main bit of advice that I would give to bands. No one will care about your band more than yourself. And if you don't care about it, like anywhere near, I'm going to say 75%, because life gets in the way, right? Then forget about it, because no one influential enough is going to care about your band more than yourself. So, always look after, always be aware of what is going on. Signing to a major label and just kicking back and assuming things would happen. But why wouldn't they? Well, I was 23 or 24, whatever. But yeah, not nonsense. The stuff that really worked was when we were all as a team and we weren't signed, and we knew exactly what was going on. And you can work with all the people you work. You know who you're working with. You know we knew who our US press was. We knew who our UK press was. We knew everybody working on things. It was small and it wasn't some massive label. And you just got pushed from this post to that pillar. And yeah, that was nonsense as well. But I do remember thinking, I don't know what else we need to do other than just write songs.
Amazing. I mean, I think. Never been anywhere near that position, but I can totally imagine. I would think exactly the same. I'd be like, right, record deal signed. When's the lorry load of cash coming in? Where's the private jet going to get here? Because surely now we're going to be headlining that would be my thought as well. So
yeah,
it's good to know. It's good to know that was your thought in the actual situation. Piers, thank you so much, mate. I mean, what do you want people to follow you on Instagram or bother you for drum lessons? Should we put links in and stuff, or are you happy to not? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I have. I irregularly post about drums. My Twitter, I equally post about either the Boxer Rebellion or Southend United.
Right.
I've got an awful lot of Southend fans that probably get really bored of half of my tweets and vice versa. I've met some Boxer Rebellion fans on the road who are like, really, really do love following you, but I wish you stopped tweeting about Southend. It's like, sorry.
Hold on.
So
I think we're missing a trick, Alan. Are you not going to do a Ryan Reynolds and a Rob McElhenney and buy Southend United? Surely this is right for the documentary, right?
They needed you the other week, didn't they?
The
other month.
The other month, yeah. Well, we've got. Don't start me on it, but we have got a new takeover just in there, and it's going through the process of it now. So we don't need him anymore.
Yeah.
Don't even need him. So yeah, I am. What is my Instagram is Piers Boxer. You will occasionally see gig photos. You'll occasionally see a photo of a child. You'll occasionally see a photo of
your child, I hope.
Well, yeah, my child. I'll put it. Or some cricket ground or football ground. That's basically it. That's all I get the time to do. Yes, if people would like drum lessons, I live in Chelmsford, centre of Chelmsford, and it's pretty easy to find me. I've got Piers Hewitt Drums on Facebook, and my Twitter is. Don't know what it is. You'll find me, no problem.
We'll find it.
We'll find you. We'll link it.
We'll put links in. We'll make you link you up and everything.
I used to have a blue tick on Twitter until he got all anal about it.
So did I, and I lost mine. And I thought I'm not going to pay the very much it is a month.
I
see anyone with a blue tick now, I just think prick. I ain't reading.
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's now I think people thought that anyway when I had a blue tick. I think people thought that about me. So.
You see something with a blue tick, and you might click on it thinking, "Hang on, this might be legit," but now it's like it's just not.
My football mates have never really given me hardly any credit for my musical exploits because I've kind of known way deeper than that. Other than occasionally going to a gig and seeing me after a gig and going, "That was really good," but They just took the piss out of my blue tick so bad. It was not worth having it, really.
Did you ever take the piss out of mine, Alan? I don't think you didn't care in the slightest, did you?
What's that? You having a blue tick?
When I blue tick, you didn't care. You didn't even know.
I don't really use Twitter much.
You don't use Twitter.
I read about 2 things on Twitter a month. Yeah.
I was hoping that would impress you. Well, Piers, thanks very much. Seriously, this has been like an absolute joy, mate. Really, really appreciate taking the time for this. It's been so insightful. I've got the feeling that you've told us 2% of the stories you could have told us. I mean, there's so much more.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll do a part 2 if people are bored enough. But yeah, an hour and 20 minutes is enough for now.
That's just the trailer.
Perfect.
That's just the trailer to your life. So, Piers, thanks very much, man. Massively appreciate it.
You're listening to a No Distance Records podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow to get updates on releases, events, and other things we've not even thought of yet.
Well, that was great. I mean, as you can tell, we could have gone on forever, right? And there would have another thing, as I said, there was so much more to go. Alan, no wonder you keep having drum lessons with this guy. I wouldn't be able to have any learning. I just want to hear more stories.
We do spend a lot of time me going, what happened when you did blah, blah, blah? Or, he drops in something like we were recording in LA. And I was like going, what was the studio like? Like, who were you working with? Like, there's a lot of chat in the lessons, but that's all it's all good grounding for the lessons as well. But yeah, what an amazing interview.
Yeah, great interview, great stuff, great insight about how the band did really well and then didn't do very, sort of all fell apart, but then it didn't quite fall apart and they kept it together. Great stuff there. If you've got this far in the interview and you listen to us doing the outro, fantastic. Thank you. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at No Distance Records. There's all stuff on there, and make sure you click subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're listening on a podcast. Then I don't know, do you like us? Is that what you do with podcasts? Do you like podcasts? Is there a thing you can subscribe? You subscribe, right?
Like, share, subscribe, it's all that jazz, isn't it?
Bit radio on, bit radio won't smash you nicely. Anyway,
just watch it.
Cheers, Alan. Thanks so much, guys, and see you next time.